Good afternoon. My name is Hersh Lebo, and I'm here with Marcy Schoenfeld, our ace cinematographer at the Edge Hill Retirement Community in Stanford. On behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County, to interview Joy Jacoby. Joy,
Yes,
how are you?
I am fine,
Good.
thank you.
Okay, and today is
Today is June the 5th, 2012. Good afternoon, Joy.
Good afternoon.
My name is Hersh Lebo, and you've met Marcy Schoenfeld, who's going to be doing the cinematography. Tell me about your early life, where you were born.
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. However, my parents moved to New Rochelle, New York when I was either 2 or 3. Unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly, but I have no recollection, therefore, of Brooklyn. So in my mind, my early childhood was all in New Rochelle. In fact, I remained in New Rochelle. For a short period, our family moved to Mamaroneck, New York for a couple of years. So in my senior year of high school, I had to go to Mamaroneck High School and graduated from there. Then eventually we moved back to New Rochelle, and when I got married, I remained in New Rochelle with my husband for 6 years. So that's the bulk of what I remember.
Tell me
from
about your
childhood
parents.
on.
What do you remember?
About
You remember
my
when
parents?
your parents, when did they marry? How did they meet?
Oh, if you're going to ask me dates, I'm afraid I
Not
can't.
dates.
When did they marry?
Well,
They married in the United States, but I don't know where, I don't know when. When I was young, I never thought to ask these questions. I've since regretted that I never thought to ask questions. Now I can't reach them, obviously.
Were they born in the United States?
No, I'm first generation American, myself and my siblings. My father was born in Odessa. Do you want me to go into any detail about it?
Well, that's all right. If you remember anything particular about his life there.
Well, I know that his father was killed in a pogrom, and he was very, very young. He has very little memory of his father, because I don't really know how old he was when his father was killed. His mother never remarried. My father then, when he reached a certain age, of course in Russia, the Jews weren't allowed to pursue all types of vocations. They were limited. So he learned tailoring, and he became very good at tailoring. When he was, I don't know how old he was when he left Russia, but he traveled through Europe. He ended up in England. We used to kid him because we'd say he had an English accent when he talked, you know. But anyway, he ended up in English. He did tailoring for some kind of theatrical place, whether it was a theater or films. Did they have films in those days? I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he did costumes. He worked on costumes there. Eventually, he came to America. I have no idea when, and I did not have the foresight to ask him about it. So I still have no idea.
And your
when.
grandmother?
My grandmother eventually, she remained in Europe, but after my father married in the States, he then brought his mother over, and she lived with us. So ever since was born, my grandmother was always a part of our life.
How did you communicate with her?
I spoke English, which she understood. Eventually, being here in the States long enough, she eventually understood English, but she didn't speak it. So I spoke English to her, as did my siblings. She spoke Yiddish to us, and having listened to it from the time I was that high, I understood Yiddish. We understood each other perfectly, even though she spoke in Yiddish and we spoke in English.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 3 brothers. I was the first girl, and then I had a sister who was born, who came after me. So we were a total of 5.
And then with your education, you mentioned you graduated from Mamaroneck High.
Mamaroneck
What
High
happened
School.
after that as far as your education?
As far as my education, Well, because my my parents were, I don't know how to say it, they were poor. They had no money to spare. They could not afford to send me to college. So I found a job in New York City. I lived in Hersh at the time, of course. Now, by this time, I had learned typing in school, and I also went to some business school in New York for a short while. I learned the stenotype machine. They used to use that in legal milieus, for lack of a better word. Yeah. Anyway, so I had that behind me, and so after high school, I went to New York. I found a job.
Doing what?
I guess I was, because my memory doesn't serve me so well at my age, but I would say that I probably did clerical work, typing work, stuff like that. And after I finished my work, I would then take the subway down to NYU. I went to school at night. I started college at night. I did that for maybe 2 years, 2.5, I don't recall exactly. And then I decided, I'm young, I'm not having any fun, I'm just commuting, working, going to school at night. When was it my turn to have a nice time? So I quit school, unfortunately.
And you met your husband?
I met my husband when a friend in New Rochelle gave a party, and she had previously lived in Harrison before New Rochelle. So she invited some old friends from Harrison. My husband was among those old friends. Of course, he was young at the time. But that's where I met him, and then afterwards he called me up and we started dating.
So his name, first name?
Larry, Lawrence, but we all called him Larry, of course.
And you got married when? Approximately.
That's a very good question. My God, I have it here somewhere.
I can give it to you. I believe it was
You probably
June.
have it. I don't have the right papers here. Let me see.
I think it was June the 18th.
June the 18th, 1949, didn't I say?
Yeah, I think it was 48, 49.
49.
That's close enough.
Okay.
And your birthday, I don't think we got.
My birthday is June 24th, 1924 I was born.
Okay,
So if you do the math, you'll understand I'm no longer young.
yes. Now, after you got married, did you go to work for RKO, or that was before you?
Oh, no, that was before I married. Well, wait a minute. I think at the beginning, for the first year or two, I still worked at RKO. I was a legal secretary for a very nice man.
That was in New York? Or?
That was in New York City, right next to Radio City Music Hall. The RKO building, it was then called the RKO building. It no longer is that anymore. But he was one of the vice presidents of RKO.
Did you have any other interesting jobs during that period of time while you were working?
Let me see. I think in New York, I started working for the New York Times, just doing clerical work, as I recall. I did that before I worked for RKO. After I worked for RKO, by the time I got married, I believe, I thought it would be better if I worked in Westchester County somewhere as close to New Rochelle as possible where we were living. I had a sister-in-law who was working as a secretary to a rabbi in New Rochelle. She found out there was an opening at a temple in Mamaroneck because there was a rabbi there who needed a secretary. So I went over and I started to work for Rabbi Irving Kozlow in Mamaroneck. If you're going to ask me how many years I worked there, I can't tell you. It might be on one of those papers.
And then you had been married.
Yeah.
You had children.
By the way, the rabbi who married us was Rabbi Kozlow, the man I worked for. And, small aside, he was the chaplain, I guess you'd call it. Do you remember the Rosenbergs who were executed?
Yes.
He was their chaplain.
It was Ethel.
And when they
Julius.
were,
Julius.
yeah, and when they were executed, he was there. He, for whatever they do, they officiate somehow, I guess. At any rate, that's just an aside.
So, after you were married, I was just asking you about children.
After I was married, I continued to work. By then, I don't know why I left the temple in Mamaroneck, but I found another job in Mount Vernon, New York. So the first 6 years that we lived in New Rochelle, I was secretary to a rabbi in Mount Vernon. His name was Dr. Henry Kagan. He wrote a book called Changing the Attitude of Christian Toward Jew. I don't know where the book is today. I never had it. And it was in the library at the temple, and I think I read it then. But so for 6 years, of the first 6 years of my marriage, I worked. Then I became pregnant, and by then my husband, who had been selling builders hardware all over Westchester County and parts of Connecticut, he came home one day and said, you know, I found a house in Stamford at a development. We could afford that house. It's $14,000. This was 1954, I believe. Yeah, 1954. So we moved to Stamford that year, and my daughter was born. My first daughter was born in 1954. She was born at Stamford Hospital. And we lived in Stamford for 11 years. The children went to school, elementary school there. When we moved, I think they were still in elementary school. But while they were going to school, I worked for a business school there. A man in Stamford ran a business school downtown, and I'd go there for just a couple of hours and teach stenography and typing, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I did that for a while, just to keep busy, because I got bored staying home too much. But anyway, then we moved to Pound Ridge. Oh, by that time, my husband had decided selling builders hardware was not the greatest thing in the world. And it was after World War II, right? So building was going on at a pretty hefty pace in those days. There was a lot of building going on. So he and his brother got together and they decided, why didn't they become builders? They apprenticed themselves out to a friend who was a carpenter. They wanted to learn how to build a house from the ground up. Then they started their own business. It was Jacoby Brothers Incorporated. And I don't remember, before 1965, he built our house in Pound Ridge. He selected Pound Ridge because he had always loved a rural type of an area. He remembered where his mother had grown up when she was young, up in Hadlime, Connecticut. They lived on a farm. Her father wanted to be a farmer. So he always liked that. He liked a lot of space around him. And he then built our house. And he and his brother started to do business in Pound Ridge mostly. They started by building houses on on speculation. Eventually, they only did custom-built homes. After a while, they never even advertised because all their business was word of mouth. Both of them lived in Pound Ridge. My husband and his brother and their families, obviously. So people knew that if they used a local builder, they could always find them afterwards if they had complaints. But they were pretty meticulous about their work. They had a wonderful reputation.
Now you had a second child.
Then I had a second child in 1956. Yes.
What were the children's names?
Lori was the first one. I got that when I saw the play Oklahoma. The heroine was Lori, and I liked the name. Well, I like the name Larry. I always like that. L is a soft sounding word. So my oldest daughter is Lori. My second daughter is Lisa.
Do you have grandchildren?
Oh, yes.
How many grandchildren?
Let me see, how many grandchildren do I have? I have 4. They each have 2 children.
You don't have any great-grandchildren?
Not yet. They were, my daughters worked, so they were kind of late in the raising family business.
Now, you went on with your education.
Yes.
What, can you tell us about that?
Yes, I think by the time both of my daughters were in high school, I had a lot more time on my hands. And I had always wanted to do something. I had been used to working beforehand. So when I heard that Pace University had opened a branch in Pleasantville, New York, I realized that, okay, while my kids were in high school, I could drive to Pleasantville. It wasn't that far from Pound Ridge. And I could be home even before the girls came home. Not that they weren't old enough to stay by themselves for an hour or 2 hours, but I liked to be there when they were there. I enjoyed them. So I found out from somebody I knew that this girl I knew, this woman I knew, was going to Pleasantville, and she was close to myself in age. So they were encouraging older women to come back. It was, I like to call it the year of the women, when women were going back to school in droves. There was a time, you know, when it became the thing to do, I guess. So when I went to Pace, I was hardly the only woman of my age. But because I brought something with me in the way of experience, and I always liked to write. When my kids were little, and they were napping or to do something like that, and I had time on my hands, I used to write, what do I call it? Not poetry, but I like to think of the poor man's Ogden Nash. Do you remember it?
Yeah.
You know, what do you call that kind of rhyming? I don't know. It'll come to me tomorrow, which it will be too late for today.
Candy is, you remember that one?
Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker.
Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker.
quicker. Absolutely. I have a whole bunch of my writing here in a drawer, in a big thing. So I used to like that. Anyway, I went to Pace University, and I think they had special courses for older women. So we had our choice of a couple of majors, and mine had to do with, I believe, public administration. I have it on one of these resume papers, what I majored.
And you graduated?
I graduated summa cum laude. It was easy at that stage. Do you remember taking a test on a blue little booklet? Those
Yes.
little blue booklets? I have one little booklet here where the teacher wrote, it was social studies, I believe, and she wrote 100 she gave me, and she said, "You certainly write beautifully. It is a pleasure to read." Well, you can imagine how how well I felt about that.
Just interject, they still use those blue booklets.
They do.
Marcy's a
Something-
teacher.
I was a teacher, so they still
Some
use
things
it.
never change.
Never
I
change.
could even show you that booklet later, so you'll know I'm not kidding.
Do you have any memories of Stanford in the years that you lived?
Yeah, we lived
Stanford,
there
any particular-
11 years.
That stands out.
That stands out. It was nice because it was the only time, I mean, I grew up in apartment houses, and they were not in the best area in New Rochelle. So living in a house, albeit maybe not a large house, but we had some ground around it. We were in the development, that we had very nice neighbors. And I thought, wow,
Do
I
you remember
enjoyed
the
it.
address?
Yeah,
The address.
48 Ken Court. So was it 68 Ken Court? I'm not going to swear to it, but it was Ken Court. That much I do know. Off Cedar Heights Road, if you know Stamford. Do you live in Stamford?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Off Cedar Heights Road. And not too far from High Ridge. Yeah, let me see. When my kids were in school, I have forgotten, but I was involved with a theater group there that was attached to the school. We put on a play for the school, and we'd go rehearse at somebody's home, the woman who led the little theater group. So I did get involved in that.
How about community activities?
I was in the League of Women Voters. I enjoyed that because I've always been a political junkie.
Anything particular stand out about?
No, because I wasn't that involved. I was still, I'm taking care of young kids, and that was my first priority. That's why I stopped working. I wanted to be at home to be with my children.
Later on, when they
Later
got
on,
older?
yeah, then in Pound Ridge, I also belonged to the League of Women Voters. In fact, I had some kind of, I had a position there. I mean, not paid, obviously, but I forgot what it was. It's on one of those resumes. So I was with them, with the League, and we used to have, and there was some kind of group that met in the library at Pound Ridge, and we had discussions about current events and things that were going on. And I remember participating in those discussions. I enjoyed that.
In all the years that you lived in these various areas,
Mhm.
did you encounter any anti-Semitism?
Personally, no. No. I remember in Hersh when I went to school, my friends were mostly Jewish gals. Somehow you gather together with your own kind, you feel more comfortable with them. It's what I call de facto segregation, And even in Mamaroneck, where I spent 1 year, my senior year, my friends were Jewish ladies. And I kept the friendship of one Jewish gal, and when she got married, she and her husband were very good friends with my husband and myself. So I have pleasant memories because I always did fairly well at school.
How about your life here at Edge Hill?
Edge Hill?
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I don't believe it because I came here not knowing what to expect, except that, I had been given the grand tour and all that. And I
You
knew
came
that
here what year?
2000, September of 2000. Was it 2000, 97, 98, 99, 2000?
Yeah.
2000, 2001?
It's okay.
I think it was 2001. Anyway, I came here, and let me see, how can I say? I got to know a number of people. There was a big tall man here who had been in theater. He had played with the London Fontaine and Catherine Cornell, you name it, of that vintage. But he not only was an actor, he was a stage manager. He was a man who brought cultural groups to Europe. Do you remember? There was a time when they were sending like dance troupes, ballet troupes and other theatrical groups to Europe. They were exchanging cultural experiences, I guess. He was very much involved in that. Anyway, he belonged to the Players Club in Gramercy Park in New York. He had married very late in life, never had any children, and his wife had passed away. So he continued going to the Gramercy Club Park, or Gramercy Players Club, and he invited many of us from Edge Hill to go with him. So we would go sometimes in a van, sometimes one of the men would drive a few of us there. And we'd go there, they would put on a little performance, we'd have dinner there, drinks, dinner. He wouldn't let us pay for a thing. He paid for everything, and he'd have maybe a dozen people there, maybe more, I don't recall at this point. I was one of the lucky ones to be part of that. Then he passed away when he was almost 102, he passed away.
God bless him.
That was our first centenarian. He gave a speech when he was a centenarian, gave a speech in our big auditorium about his life and his career. That was his birthday, then he was 100. And he never used any notes. He talked for God knows how long, and never faltered. It was amazing. And then they had a party for him. They're very big with parties around here. And then somebody wanted to put on a show here, a woman who has since passed away. Oh, by the way, then this guy, this actor, he had a friend whom I met, a man who was very involved in governance around here. he insisted, when he found out my background, he said, we need a secretary for the residence council. I said, I'm not interested, been there, done that. Well, I won't say he twisted my arm, but close, so I gave in. I became secretary of the residence council, which was a lot of work, because I took minutes and with pencil. By then, I didn't even have a typewriter, so I'd have to bring it to one of the gals in the office and they would type it up for me. And then somebody wanted to put on a show, one of the women who lived here, no longer lives here. And they had been talking about it, but nobody did anything, and she finally took the bull by the horns and decided, okay, let's have a show. And she asked our actor friend to give us a few pointers, et cetera, et cetera. She got a committee together and we started. And somebody wrote a play called Life at the Edge. At that time, Meryl Streep's parents lived at Edge Hill, and her mother was a cartoonist, like she could draw very good. We had a playbill, it looked like a real playbill that you get in the theater. We had a playbill, it said Life at the Edge, and this picture that Meryl Streep's mother drew was of a man hanging from the eave of a roof with the pants lowered down. In fact, I think I have it in there somewhere. I'll show it to you later. But anyway, it was funny. So we did a show, and I was in the choir, and then the gal who directed us was a resident here. I don't know if the name would mean anything to you, but she acted on Broadway. She also was in television. Do you remember the series called I Remember Mama?
Yes.
She played the daughter Katrina on that program. Rosemary Merrill is her name. So Rosemary, after I'd been in the choir a while, she said, some of us had written parodies of songs, and we were singing those parodies. She said, you know, the words are clever, but we can't always hear them. So she said, Joy, when it's time for a song, you get up, sing the song solo, and then everybody will join you in on the second chorus. So that's what I did. I became the lead singer. In the second show, I was on stage as a lead singer, and in the third show, now I had never sung in public before. So you asked me what did I do, and I got to Edge Hill. Oh, by the way, the same guy who twisted my arm to get me into council, another girl and I would take him and the actor out because one of them would drive us sometimes. We wanted to repay them. We didn't belong to a country club, so we would take them out to dinner to a very nice place. Fancy French restaurant in Rye, or Le Chateau in Katona. So here were the two of us dating these guys. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed it.
So would you
They
recommend?
were good company.
So would you recommend Edge Hill
Edge
to
Hill?
all your senior friends?
Yeah, I would. I think because you can be as active as you want or as inactive as you want. You make the choices. There are enough activities going on here. Well, now we have new administration, and they're still to be proven. We don't exactly know whether they're going to be many changes, but so far it has all gone very smoothly. Can't complain. And it sure as hell, pardon me, you can delete that if you like. Sure as hell beats living all alone, especially in Pound Ridge on 3 acres with a swimming pool in the back. This from a girl who was brought up in apartment houses. I lived in an apartment over the stores underneath. So don't think I didn't enjoy living in Pound Ridge. It was great.
You can never always predict what's going to happen to you.
No, and you know, when I married my husband, at that time he had lost his job. So somebody said, how can you marry a man who's not working? Worked out fine.
Can you think of
No
anything?
complaints.
Can you think of anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk
You had
about?
said something about a Jewish organization that you belong to, someone, because you said you were affiliated, you talked about growing up, your mother was, or your grandmother was.
My grandmother.
So can you talk about that, about the
Well,
Jewish affiliation?
Yeah, I didn't. We just walked her to the synagogue to make sure she'd be all right. There were 3 temples in New Rochelle, and she went to the Orthodox one where the women all sat upstairs. Well, obviously my grandmother was an elderly lady.
Did you have a kosher home for her?
Oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Shabbat candles?
Yes.
Okay, so
Benched
you're
with-
more religious than you thought you were.
Well, I was brought up where they did observe those things, but I don't remember my mother and father going to temple very much, or to synagogue, I should say, because when they went, it was, let me see, there's Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform, right?
Mhm.
They went to a conservative when they went, but mostly they went on high holidays. They didn't go on a regular basis. However, because of these charitable women in New Rochelle, I went to the Reform Temple. I was sent there, and I went through Sunday school there for a number of years till I graduated. If you ask me how many years, I can't tell you. I don't remember when I started, but it was a number of years.
Do you remember anything in your childhood that particularly stands out?
In my childhood, that particularly stands out
Grade school?
in grade school.
Did you have a bat mitzvah?
No. No, I don't think it was done very much at that time. It was not a usual thing.
Did your daughters?
No, no. I enrolled my daughters in Temple Sinai here in Stamford, but they didn't take to it. They didn't like it, and they gave me such a hard time about it. I thought, okay, I came through okay without much Sunday school. Well, I did go to Sunday school later, but Reform. But we let them out. My husband was not very religious either, so it didn't matter to him that they wanted to drop out. So they went, but for a short time. If they went for a year, that was a lot. So we tried.
Joy, what are your recollections of World War II?
Well, for the first thing I think of is I had my three brothers were in the war at the same time. One of them was very badly wounded. He ended up in Halloran Hospital. I remember taking the subway to New York, taking the train to New York, and then the subway to visit him at the hospital.
Where,
And
in
it's-
what area in the war? I mean, Europe, Pacific? Do you remember?
He was in Europe. My oldest brother was in Hawaii when Pearl Harbor happened.
Oh.
But he was in Schofield Barracks, which was not right in that area. That was bombed, I don't think.
That was an Air Force base, Schofield, I think.
Schofield, if you read the book From Here to Eternity, that was based on Schofield Barracks. I think they even mentioned it. And my brother once said to me, the brother who was there, he said, if you want to know what Schofield Barracks, what it was like, he said, that book is a very accurate depiction of life at Schofield Barracks. Of course, he didn't have Deborah Carr at the end, but anyway, so one was in Europe, that was Melvin, who got wounded. My brother in Hawaii, and the other brother, I have to check with my sister, because my memory's bad. I think he was in the Air Force. I don't know why. I don't remember him flying. Can you be in the Air Force
Yes.
without flying?
Sure.
Okay, I think he served in the Air Force. And where was he? In a number of places, and I don't recall. It's been a long time.
And your husband didn't have to go?
My husband, they wouldn't take him. He wanted to go because he felt, as a Jew, that's how my oldest brother enlisted. He said it was his fight. He belonged there, and he enlisted. He was in college at the time. He wanted to become a veterinarian. He was in some college out in the Midwest. He dropped out and he enlisted because he thought it was important that he should be there. My husband, too, wanted to join, but as I said, he had polio when he was a kid, and the only sign of it was that one arm was very wasted and he couldn't lift it up. If he wanted to hang pictures, he'd have to go like that. He'd have to hold it up. And when he went, you could see when we went swimming in a pool, you could see the one arm was very much thinner. He wanted to enlist, they wouldn't accept him. So that kind of rankled him, but I didn't know him then, did I? No, I don't think so. I'm getting my time mixed up.
Well, we enjoyed visiting with you.
Thank you.
You gave us a very good appreciation of what life has been like for you over the years. We wish you good health and a
Thank you.
long life here. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
allowing us.
Is there anything you'd like to say that we didn't ask you?
I don't think so.